Hey, what's going on, guys? It's HawksNest here, back with another Call of Duty mobile video. Now, inside of today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Basically, what we're going to be doing is actually rating people's HUDs. And while we're actually doing this, obviously, we'll be talking about why I actually gave it the rating that I did give it, as well as some of the things that I think are kind of unique about the HUD. But if you guys are wondering what HUDs we're actually going to be taking a look at, I do have a couple different YouTubers' HUDs actually set up for me to look at, which includes Noah from YouTube, BobbyPlays, Godzly, Ferg, and Jokesta, and then we'll probably look at mine as well, just so I can talk about it a little bit. But before I get on with the video, definitely make sure to drop a sub down below if you guys want to see more Call of Duty mobile content. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on with the video. Now, before we actually get into looking at all of the HUDs, I did make a quick little thing right here to kind of describe what makes a good HUD, so you guys can kind of understand that as we do actually look at the HUDs. So let's just go ahead and talk about the important aspects of a HUD. So the very first thing is that you want to be able to perform multiple important actions at once. The most important actions are obviously going to be aiming, as well as shooting, as well as jumping, as well as moving around, so like your joystick. So typically with like a two-finger HUD, you'll have your left thumb, which will be your joystick, and then your right thumb will be like jump, crouch, aim. It'll be a bunch of different stuff, and obviously that is really hard to do a bunch of things at once, so that's why players will typically upgrade from 2 fingers to 3 or 4 fingers. So I'm curious to see if there is some good 2-finger HUDs inside of today's video, as we do actually look at some of the viewer HUDs. But again, most HUDs that are 3 or 4 fingers will basically be optimized in a way that you're able to do a bunch of really important actions at once. After that, the next important one is that you want to be able to strafe fire effectively. Strafe fire is basically move around while you shoot. This is a very important aspect of actually taking gunfights. I did do an entire video covering this, but basically to do this, you do have to have a HUD that allows you to shoot your gun while also moving your joystick. So that is going to be an important aspect of the HUDs that we do take a peek at. And then the third aspect is going to be that you do want to have plenty of space to actually aim your weapon. So, which basically just means you want a pretty decent amount of your HUD to be dedicated to you actually aiming around at your opponents. After that is you want to have good vision. You don't want your buttons to be really cluttered and just covering everything. Some of the HUDs that we do see might be a little bit more cluttered than they probably should be, but there is a good chance that maybe what the players did with those HUDs was just lowered the visibility of the buttons, so that the buttons will be in a bunch of different places, but you're still able to see a lot on your screen. After that, the next important aspect is that you want it to be comfortable. This is something that's going to be hard for me to rate because I have a different hand, or I have different hands and finger sizes and all that stuff than other players, so it's going to be really hard to basically rate the comfort level. But if you're comfortable with the HUD and it works for you, then it works for you, and my rating really doesn't mean anything. But I just wanted to kind of make this video just so we can talk a little bit more about what makes a good HUD, and as well as hopefully help some of you guys make a better HUD. So that now brings us to the YouTubers. I spent a lot of time on the viewer ones. There's just so many of them and just so much to talk about, so I'll probably trim that down so it's not super long. We'll probably just talk about like the highlights or something. But in terms of the YouTubers, starting with Jokesta HUD, he does actually have 2 HUDs. He has an iPad HUD as well as an iPhone HUD. So I think the very first one we're going to talk about is the iPad, and then we'll talk about the phone. So I think the most unique thing here is that he does actually have his ADS button on the opposite side of his crouch and jump button. We've talked about this a little bit, but basically that makes it so that how does Jokesta play? So Jokesta's HUD, so this is the first time I'm taking a look at it, and this is really interesting. So he has his fire button where his crouch and jump button is, which would lead me to believe that he's not able to actually crouch shot or jump shot. But then he has a fire button over here stacked on top of his ADS button while jumping. But then what happens with it? I'm curious to see how this works. Oh, okay, so it seems like the way that he plays is actually like 6 fingers, so he's not actually doing a 4-finger setup, which makes more sense now. So basically he uses his middle finger to press these 2 buttons, and then his pointer finger presses this button right here, and same thing goes over here. So his middle finger presses prone and reload, and then his pointer finger presses the ADS button. Okay, so that makes more sense to me now. I was thinking this is a 4-finger HUD. It's a 4-finger HUD, I wouldn't understand what's going on, but 6 fingers makes a lot more sense. Middle finger here, pointer finger here, thumb here. Same thing on this side. Okay, so that's Jokesta's iPad. Okay, that makes sense now. So 6-finger HUD. He also plays with the iPad flat, which I've already talked about a little bit. Hopefully I left it inside the video, but basically I don't like doing that because then it's harder for me to transfer over to a phone, and I just don't like leaning forward that much, because with a flat iPad you have to legit be like playing like this, which I don't like for my neck and everything. So I do have this little like stand on it, which basically helps me kind of prop up and instead a little straighter. It would be the best thing for me to do if I had it like on a stand like this, but I just never really got used to that, and I don't really play the game enough for me to make that switch. So right now I'm kind of fine with this, but again, ideally you want to have your iPad either held like this or on some kind of stand, just to kind of keep your neck really straight. Next up is Jokesta's phone HUD. Phone HUD is going to be 6 finger. How many fingers is this? Well, he has a video. Let's see what he says. So he plays 6 fingers on the phone with the phone flat on the table. So screw me. I was saying that you can't do that, but he does. So what he has is the exact same thing. He has his middle finger pressing these 2 buttons, pointer finger on this one, middle finger these 2 buttons, and then pointer finger on this one. So it's literally the exact same thing from his iPad, but basically just transferred to a phone layout, which is really interesting and not very practical for me because I think you should hold the phone. I think the benefit of the phone is the portability, but this would make it so that you're stuck on your desk when you're playing with the phone, basically, or you'd have to like put it on your lap. So I don't really like the idea of that. And again, that's why I don't play 6 fingers, because it'd be harder to transfer over. But I mean, if he wants to switch between devices, he kind of has to do this kind of HUD now, because again, he is a 6 finger player, so transferring from 4 to 6 would be kind of difficult. So yeah, I think I'd rate his iPad HUD. I think it's really good at what it's for, but then I think the phone HUD is not rated as well because you're getting way more cluttered. You have more fingers on the screen. It's not as portable and all that. So I think the phone would be like a 5. I mean, he did well with what he was given. If he has to play 6 fingers, then it's a good HUD, but I think the fact that he's playing with his phone flat on the table with 6 fingers is kind of hindering him on the phone a little bit, or not hindering him, but it's basically making it less versatile. So I think that, again, the iPad HUD for 6 finger layout, I'd probably give like a solid, probably like an 8 or 9. I mean, it seems like he can do everything that he needs to do. I can't see any issues with it, but again, I think with the phone, we have a little bit more of a problem. I'll probably give it like a 5. Again, it does what it needs to, but I don't think it needs to do that, I guess. Next up is Ferg's HUD. Now this one is chaotic. I think he plays with 6 fingers as well, I'm pretty sure. I tried to watch his hand cam. I tried to figure out what was going on. I literally copied his HUD, and this is my screenshot. I couldn't get a screenshot of his just because he has every button like invisible and he moves them all the time, but this is as recent as I could possibly get, and let's go ahead and talk about it. So basically the way that he plays is he uses his thumb, so this thumb right here for this shoot button, and then he aims with his pointer finger, and then he uses his middle finger, I believe, for buttons like this. So he uses his pointer finger like right here to aim and stuff, and then again his thumb will be actually firing, which is really unique. Again, we don't see very many players actually aiming with their pointer finger, but the good thing about the pointer finger is it's a little bit longer than the thumb and just a little bit more, I don't know, it moves a little bit better, so you're definitely gonna have a little bit more precision. Then obviously Ferg does play with the 12.9-inch iPad, and he has it flat on his desk, so basically it allows him to have a ton of different degree of motion. Like, he could literally move his finger anywhere on the iPad very easily because there's nothing holding him back. Whereas for me, I hold my iPad like this, and my thumb is right here for aiming, and I obviously can't move it across the screen because my hand sits like this, so I just can't move it because the iPad's in the way. So that's a good thing for Ferg's HUD, is he can literally move his finger anywhere, which gives him a lot of aiming freedom. But again, he's not going to be able to transfer this to a phone as well, which personally was a big deal for me. But for what he has right here, that's really good for aiming at least. And then shooting is going to be his thumb, which is good. I guess that does limit him a little bit, like he can't move his finger all the way across the screen because his thumb has to stay on that shoot button, but that's not really a big deal just because it's not like he's gonna have to move his finger all the way across the screen. And then middle finger, I assume, is gonna be reload and the ADS button, which seems good there. I can't see any issues. And then for movement, he has his left pointer finger as his joystick, left thumb for crouch, and left middle finger for his jump button. So that all seems good. Separate fingers for separate inputs, so he should be able to do everything that he wants to do at once. I mean, Ferg's played mobile games for a very long time and understands what fits him best and what works in certain games and what doesn't work. So obviously this HUD works really well for him. The only thing I think that I would kind of criticize on a HUD like this is that he does have to sit like this, which for him, especially since he does stream so much, it's not going to be good for his neck and back. I know that he exercises, so that's going to help him a ton. But I do think he is going to be kind of stuck in a position where trying to switch to like an iPad stand, for example, or trying to switch to something where he does have a little bit more of a straighter back and is able to keep his device up is going to be very difficult with the HUD like this. And switching over to a phone is also going to be very difficult, especially since you literally like can't aim with your pointer finger on a phone. I mean, you can if you have a big enough phone, but it is extremely difficult because your pointer finger typically is going to be above the phone, like right here, which is going to make it very difficult to aim. So overall, I think his HUD probably is going to be like a 9 out of 10 for what it's designed to do, which is absolutely slay out on a big iPad flat on the table. But if he does try to switch it over to a phone, I do think that is going to be really difficult for him just because of the way that the HUD is laid out. I'm not saying Ferg is a bad phone player, but his HUD doesn't really transfer as well just because it's literally spread out across a 13-inch screen, whereas trying to squeeze that all into a different one would be extremely difficult. Even trying to transfer this over to like a 4-finger HUD would be a really difficult task just because he does use his pointer fingers for joystick and aiming, which is not something you typically see. Next up is going to be Godzly's HUD. Now, Godzly's HUD is actually very similar to mine, and really the only difference is that I actually have my crouch, my jump, and my ADS button on the right side, and then my shoot button on the left, and then same thing with this button right here where like the guns are. I have that on the right side. So as you can tell, he's basically going to be moving around with his left thumb. Left pointer finger is going to be doing the mobility type stuff. Right pointer finger is going to be shooting, and then right thumb is going to be movement. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about this HUD. It's very similar to mine. Again, I just have them switched. He also has his buttons always visible, like really, really visible, which personally I think he should minimize just so he has a little bit more vision of the map and everything, kind of like how Ferg has it. Right now, I made these super visible so you guys could see it, but again, typically he has them so they're almost completely gone, which I think is a change Godzly could make to actually have a little bit more visibility, but in terms of where the buttons are and everything like that, I think that's really good. And then obviously Godzly has the little sprint button right here, which you can actually turn on and off, basically to just serve as like a little crosshair when there isn't typically one. So yeah, I think Godzly's HUD, I think it's pretty much perfect. I think it would be able to do basically everything that he actually needs to do, and it would also be able to transfer to other devices pretty well. And I think the only thing that I would change is just make the buttons a little bit more transparent. All right, so for Bobby's HUD, Bobby's HUD is interesting. So he aims around with his right thumb. His joystick is his left thumb. His reload is his right thumb, so that makes sense. Knife is here. Not going to talk about that too much. And then his right pointer finger is going to be ADS as well as crouch. One thing is they're pretty separated, which is interesting. I know he plays with his iPad flat on the table. I think he uses an iPad Pro 2020 11-inch, which is the same as me. So if he plays with it flat, that means he's going to be able to put his fingers really wherever he wants to. He's not kind of limited by holding the device. So, I mean, personally, I would have these a little bit closer, but it probably works just fine for him like that. Same thing for the shoot button and the jump button. The only thing that I'm wondering is having the jump button on the left, it seems like he wouldn't be able to shoot and jump at the same time because he does have this shoot button turned off. So I'm trying to understand how that dynamic works. Can he jump shoot? If he's pressing the shoot button, he would have to take his finger off to press the jump button. So I personally would probably move that button to like right here, but I'm curious to know why he has that. Bobby, if you're watching this video, let me know. I'm curious, I'm trying to understand. So like, he can jump and drop shot, or he can drop shot and crouch shot just fine because obviously these buttons are separated. But yeah, it just seems like he wouldn't be able to jump shot just because these buttons are using the same finger, and obviously you can't have one finger in two different places. Overall, a good HUD. I think the only difference or the only change that I would make again would be tighten these up a little bit as well as move the jump button to this side. Overall, I'd probably give this one like a 7 out of 10. 7 or 8, maybe 7.5. And the last HUD that we actually have is going to be Noah's HUD. Noah's HUD is beautiful because it's basically my HUD. It's almost exactly the exact same thing. Basically, he has his main shoot button on the top left, joystick on the bottom left, which is just movement, shooting, and then aiming around is going to be right here. Has the reload button on the bottom. I have it on the top, but reload button can really go wherever is comfortable, just because you're not really doing that at the same time as other things typically. And then he does have this little grouping of his jump, his crouch, and his ADS button, which is what I have. The only difference from my HUD is that I actually have them ordered a little bit differently. For me, I have my ADS button here, I have my jump button here, which is the same spot, and then I have my crouch button here, which is one thing that I kind of regret getting used to because then I have to reach my finger really far in between these buttons, whereas for Noah, he can just have a nice little grouping here so his finger doesn't have to move that much in between button presses. So I think his configuration is actually better than mine in that regard. And again, one of the things that I love about a 4-finger HUD like this is that he could transfer this kind of HUD over to a phone or a smaller device very easily if he wanted to. So it's a very, very versatile type HUD. And overall, I think it's probably one of the best that I've actually seen, and even better than mine, which I know I'm biased and I think my HUD is really good. For me, it's really good. But even then, I think if I were to make a change, I would move towards what Noah has. And then I guess the only other unique thing that I would talk about is the fact that he has his operator on the left, which is unique. Really big map, which I like, having good visibility. I don't have mine personally this big just because I think that covers a little bit too much for me. I maybe have it like to here, but still good map size, got your score up here. Everything's good, good visibility. These buttons I would reduce in transparency, which I think he has reduced in transparency. I think I made this HUD just a screenshot just because I couldn't see his buttons. So, but yeah, so that's it for Noah's HUD. And I think that's pretty much it for everything else. I guess the other thing about Bobby's is he has these buttons shifted to the left, which I'm curious to know what finger presses it. I would assume his left thumb, just because he moved it closer to that, which is something that you don't see that much. I think Ferg did like the same thing. He kind of moved it up just so it's a little bit closer to his fingers. And then he also has his actually Ferg has his transparency, yeah, like all the way down on his health bar, which I've noticed is kind of weird for streams just because I never know how much HP he's at because I can never see the HP bar, which is something personally I would make a little bit more visible just because it's at like the bottom of the screen, so it's not going to be distracting for the viewers. But yeah, everything else for Ferg's screen is basically invisible invisible. So that is it for this video. The recording, by the way, was 58 minutes, so I literally recorded an hour of footage. So now I have to figure out kind of how to edit that down and present all of this information in hopefully like a 15-minute video. We'll see. I'll probably just leave a couple viewer HUDs in and then obviously the YouTuber ones. But if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know down below. Right now, I'll flash up a screen of what my HUD looks like on my iPad just so you guys can kind of know. Again, very similar to Noah's. But with all of that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed and I will see you guys later. Peace.